You know those moments in life, the ones where your stomach just drops out? Where you look at your phone, and the little glowing screen holds a message that you know is going to completely change the shape of your next week, maybe even the rest of the year. For me, that moment happened last Thursday at about 11:30 p.m. I was sitting on the floor of my tiny apartment, eating cheap ramen straight out of the pot, listening to the muffled sounds of the city coming in through the window. Everything was perfectly normal, perfectly boring. My name is Alex. I'm 24, a freelance graphic designer, and I live with my best friend from college, Marcus. Marcus is a great guy, loud, a little messy, but totally dependable. We've been through everything, including his complicated family dynamic, which mostly revolved around his older sister, Chloe. Chloe, that's where the complication starts. She lives 3 floors up in the same building. She's everything Marcus isn't: quiet, artistic, and frankly, a little mysterious. Marcus almost never talked about her, and when she did visit, it was always a quick, tense exchange in the lobby. I'd maybe seen her 6 times in the 2 years we'd lived here, and every time, she gave me this look that wasn't exactly friendly, but wasn't hostile either. It was calculating, like she was trying to read my entire life story just by looking at my worn-out sneakers. We kept our distance. That was the rule, unspoken but clear. I had my life down here with Marcus, and she had hers up there. It was safe. It was easy. But last Thursday, my phone buzzed on the floor next to the ramen pot. It was a text, a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it, figured it was a wrong number or spam. But something, maybe that little, irrational curiosity that always gets you into trouble, made me pick it up. The name listed was Chloe, sister. My heart hammered against my ribs, a sudden, frantic drumbeat. Why was she texting me? She'd never had my number. I opened the message, my thumb shaking slightly as I tapped the screen. The text was short, just 6 words. It read, "Come upstairs, but don't knock." Don't knock? It was late. Marcus was out working the night shift. And Chloe, the woman who avoided me like a bad cold, was suddenly inviting me to her apartment, demanding secrecy. My mind immediately went to the worst places. Had something happened? Was Marcus in trouble? Or was this something darker, something involving the strange, almost panicked glances I'd seen her give him sometimes when she thought I wasn't looking? I sat there, the steam from the ramen suddenly feeling cold, staring at the message until the screen went dark. This wasn't a casual invitation. This was a summons. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that if I went up those 3 flights of stairs, the safe, simple life I had downstairs would be gone forever. But how could I not go? She asked me not to knock. What was she hiding behind that closed door, and why did she need me to see it right now? I got up, put the ramen down, and walked toward the apartment door. The moment my hand touched the cool metal of the doorknob, I heard a faint, sharp sound from above us. It sounded exactly like something heavy had just hit a wall. I paused, frozen in the hallway. If I walked out that door, I was stepping into her world, and I had a terrible feeling that her world was completely broken. I took 1 step into the dimly lit hallway, my eyes fixed on the ceiling. I knew I shouldn't go, but the noise from upstairs pulled me forward. What was the secret Chloe was protecting, and was I about to become a part of it? I will continue the script now, focusing on the background and setup, building emotional depth around Alex, Marcus, and Chloe, and ending with a mini cliffhanger. My relationship with Marcus was the easiest thing in my life. We met freshman year of college, bonded over a shared love of terrible sci-fi movies and the stress of deadlines. He's the kind of guy who'd give you his last $20, no questions asked. We were a team, a good balance. I was the quiet, organized one. He was the loud, spontaneous one. When we moved into this building, it felt like we'd finally made it. 2 broke guys finding their footing in the world. But Chloe was always the footnote in the story of Marcus. You know how some families have a secret room they just don't open? That was Chloe. They shared the same sharp cheekbones and dark, intense eyes, but their personalities were planets apart. Marcus was an open book. Chloe was an encyclopedia locked in a vault. When I first asked Marcus about her, he just shrugged, a little too quickly. "Oh, Chloe? She's fine. Just busy." He mentioned she was a post-grad research student in something heavy like theoretical physics, constantly working, always stressed. He made it sound like a perfectly normal sibling estrangement, the kind that happens when 2 people grow up and choose different paths. But I'd seen the cracks. Once, a few months ago, I walked into the kitchen and Marcus was on the phone, his voice a low, frantic whisper. He was saying things like, "You need to be careful, Chloe, and please, just let me help you." The moment he saw me, he slammed the phone down and acted like nothing happened, humming a tune while pouring coffee. I didn't press him. I respected his space. But it planted a seed of doubt. What was Chloe doing that required Marcus to be so secretive and stressed? The situation became tenser about a month ago. Chloe's visits stopped entirely. She'd always been a ghost, but now she was completely gone, only an occasional light flickering in her third-floor window to prove she was still there. Marcus started canceling our usual Friday night routine, saying he was out with friends, but he'd come home looking pale and exhausted, like he hadn't slept for days. It wasn't the look of someone having fun. It was the look of someone carrying a heavy weight. I thought about all of this as I walked up the first flight of stairs. The concrete steps were cold under my sneakers. The air felt heavy, dead silent, which was unusual for our building. I kept running the text through my head. Asterisk, come upstairs, but don't knock. Asterisk, it wasn't just the secrecy, it was the power dynamic. It wasn't an asking, it was a command. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that this wasn't just Marcus's sister. This was someone who had a subtle, yet profound, hold on him. Was she in debt? Was she hiding something from the law? Or was it something even more personal, a deep, dark secret that only siblings could share? I finally reached the third-floor landing. The hallway light was buzzing faintly, casting long, nervous shadows. Her apartment door, 302, was right there. I could hear nothing behind it, just the frantic rhythm of my own heart. I lifted my hand, ready to follow her instruction, ready to quietly twist the knob. But as I reached out, my fingers brushed against something taped to the outside of the door, right near the handle. It was a small, white piece of paper. I pulled it off gently. It wasn't a note. It was a faded photograph of Marcus, about 10 years old, standing next to a man I didn't recognize. The man's face was half torn off, but what remained of his eyes were staring right at me. And written in Chloe's precise, looping handwriting across the back was a single, terrifying question. Do you know what he did? I looked from the photo, back to the silent, closed door. She hadn't just invited me into her problem. She was linking me to Marcus's history, a history I knew nothing about. Who was the man in the picture, and what was the thing he did that had Chloe so terrified she was sending me secret texts? This section will focus on the immediate tension as Alex enters Chloe's apartment and faces the mystery of the photograph, building the central conflict. My hand was sweating as I looked at that photograph. Marcus, the smiling kid, next to a ghost with half a face. It completely contradicted the image Marcus had always presented. The easygoing friend, the guy with the normal, slightly distant sister. Normal people don't tape cryptic, menacing photos to their doors and ask you to sneak in. I crumpled the photo into my pocket, my mind racing. I pushed down the urge to race back downstairs, grab Marcus's phone, and demand answers. I was already here. I had to see what Chloe wanted. More importantly, I had to find out what she was hiding that involved Marcus's childhood. Taking a deep, shaky breath, I gripped the doorknob. It turned easily, smoothly. Unlocked. She had been waiting for me. The first thing that hit me when I stepped inside wasn't the smell of perfume or takeout. It was silence, a heavy, absolute silence that felt wrong for an inhabited apartment. The air was cold, much colder than our place downstairs. I slipped inside and gently pushed the door shut behind me, the soft click echoing unnervingly loud. The living room was neat, almost clinically so. Every book was lined up perfectly on the shelf, the furniture covered in smooth, neutral fabrics. It looked like a museum exhibit, not a home. But then I noticed the details that shattered the calm. On a small coffee table, there was a stack of papers, all marked with red circles and underlined text. They looked like police reports or legal documents, but they were upside down, too far away for me to read the titles. And across the far wall, spanning almost the entire length, was a massive whiteboard covered in neat, cramped writing. It was a tangle of timelines, arrows, names, and dates, all connected by thin red string. It looked less like theoretical physics research and more like a conspiracy theory map. As I slowly moved toward the whiteboard, the hair on the back of my neck stood up. This wasn't just stress or secrecy, this was obsession. Chloe wasn't just busy. She was consumed by something terrifying. "Chloe," I whispered, my voice tight. No answer. I reached the whiteboard and stared at the mess of information. Names I didn't know were circled in red. Dates, months ago, years ago, were labeled with cryptic phrases like "the incident" and "the cover-up." But there was one name repeated more than any other, scrawled in thick, black marker, and it was the name of the man whose eyes I'd just seen in the old photograph. Just as I started to make sense of a connection between a date and a location, a sound made me jump out of my skin. It wasn't the crash I heard earlier. This was a slow, deliberate scrape, coming from deeper inside the apartment, from what I guessed was the bedroom. My gaze snapped away from the terrifying map. Someone, or something, was moving in the dark hallway just beyond the living room. Was it Chloe? Or was it someone she was hiding? I took a protective step back, my heart pounding a frantic alarm. I needed to leave, but I needed to know what was in that room. The scrape came again, louder this time, and I realized it wasn't a scrape. It was the sound of something heavy being dragged across a wooden floor. I stood there, paralyzed between the horrifying reality of the whiteboard and the terror of the unseen figure in the back. What if Chloe hadn't texted me for help? What if she texted me as a witness, or worse, a distraction? The dragging stopped, and then a shadow appeared at the end of the hall, tall and indistinct. I couldn't see a face, but I knew, instantly, that the person attached to that shadow knew I was there, and they were staring right at me. I will maximize the tension in this rising suspense and near-climax section, focusing on the confrontation and the threat Alex faces, ending just before the pivotal moment. The shadow didn't move, and neither did I. We were locked in a silent standoff in Chloe's hyper-organized, terrifying apartment. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to turn and run, to burst through the door and sprint down those 3 flights of stairs. But the image of Marcus as a scared kid, the cryptic question on the photo, and the lunatic conspiracy map on the wall held my feet in place. If this involved Marcus, I couldn't just bail. I finally found my voice, a thin, nervous rasp. "Chloe? Is that you?" The shadow shifted slightly. And then, a sound I hadn't expected, a choked, ragged sob. The figure wasn't looming, it was broken. A woman slowly stepped into the light, and it was indeed Chloe. But she looked nothing like the composed, distant woman I'd occasionally seen in the lobby. Her hair was messy, her face was streaked with tears and dirt, and her eyes were wide and red-rimmed, staring at me with a desperate, hunted look. She was clutching a large, heavy duffel bag to her chest, the kind you take on a long trip. "Alex," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You came. You shouldn't have. What is going on, Chloe? I heard a crash earlier. And that photo. What did you mean? Do you know what he did?" I gestured toward the chaotic whiteboard. This is insane. Are you in danger?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she took 3 slow, deliberate steps toward me, her eyes darting constantly toward the windows. She looked over my shoulder, as if expecting someone to walk through the closed front door. "It's about Marcus," she said, her voice dropping to a harsh, forced whisper. "The truth Marcus has been hiding. The truth about the day he lost his memory." I felt a cold shock. Marcus losing his memory? He'd never mentioned a major incident or accident. He'd always told me he had a normal, if slightly hazy, childhood. "What are you talking about?" "He hasn't lost his memory, Chloe." She let out a short, hollow laugh that held no humor. "He made you believe that, didn't he? It was an accident when he was 14. He blocked out everything about that summer. But he didn't just forget a vacation. He forgot him." She pointed a trembling finger toward the whiteboard, right to the section that detailed the man in the photograph, the man I now knew was named Elias. "Elias was our neighbor," she continued, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. "He was the knight I couldn't escape. The man who kept showing up where he shouldn't, always near me, always watching. He never touched me, but I knew what he was. He was the reason I was terrified to leave the house. I told Marcus everything. Marcus was supposed to be my protector." She lowered her voice again, pulling me close so I had to lean in to hear the final, earth-shattering words. "But Elias didn't just disappear. The police said it was a suicide 2 months after Marcus's accident. I spent years trying to prove it wasn't. I pulled all of this together." She squeezed the duffel bag tighter. "I found proof that Elias was murdered. And the only person who knew where Elias was that night, the person who was with him just before he died, was the one person who conveniently forgot everything. My head was spinning. Marcus? A murder? Amnesia? The complexity was suffocating. I opened my mouth to argue, to defend my friend, but before I could, Chloe pressed the heavy duffel bag into my hands. I need you to take this, she urged, her voice now frantic. I need you to take this and get out. Go to the train station. There are tickets inside. Just wait there until Marcus comes to you. Don't call the police. Don't tell anyone. This bag has everything. The real reports, the evidence, and the one thing that proves Marcus. She cut herself off, her eyes fixed on the door handle. It was slowly, silently, turning. Someone was trying to get in. Someone who had not been invited, and who certainly wasn't going to not knock. Chloe pushed me violently toward a small back window. Go. Now. Tell Marcus his sister finally remembered everything, and that I'm giving her mourning back. The door started to creak open. I held the heavy bag, adrenaline surging, knowing that whatever was inside, it was the key to proving my best friend was either a victim of a dark cover-up or a cold-blooded killer. I knew I couldn't escape through the window fast enough. I clutched the bag, my mind racing. Who was standing on the other side of that door, and did they know what I was holding? I will now deliver the second twist, ensuring it is short, shocking, and dramatically raises the stakes, adhering to the 200-word constraint. My eyes were glued to the crack in the door, watching as the gap widened. Chloe stood frozen, her eyes wide with terror, her breath hitched in her throat. We were both bracing for the sight of some shadowy, dangerous figure. A police officer, a hitman, maybe even someone connected to the dead Elias. But as the door swung open, the person standing there wasn't a stranger or a villain. It was Marcus. He looked exhausted, his hair damp and slicked back, wearing the clothes he'd supposedly worn to his night shift. He didn't look like a killer. He looked like a weary man who'd just finished a 12-hour grind. But his eyes, those eyes were ice cold, empty of the warmth I knew. He saw me holding the duffel bag, and then his gaze fixed on Chloe. What is going on here? Marcus demanded, his voice low and dangerous, not the voice of my best friend. Chloe, you promised you wouldn't drag him into this. Chloe visibly sagged in relief, then immediately snapped back to fear. Marcus, thank God. He's here. I told him everything. You need to leave with him right now, before they realize you're back here. Marcus didn't move. He didn't rush to comfort his terrified sister or acknowledge the panicked look on my face. Instead, he took one slow step into the room, his eyes never leaving Chloe. He looked past her, directly at the whiteboard covered in her painstaking research, the map of timelines and names. Then, Marcus smiled. It was a thin, chilling curve of the lips I had never seen before. She always was the smart one, Marcus said, his voice now entirely devoid of emotion, a flat, terrifying monotone. He finally looked at me, his former best friend, clutching the heavy evidence bag. But she made one fatal mistake. You see, Chloe was right about the cover-up. She just got the timing wrong. I didn't forget everything when I was 14. I forgot it 6 years later, when I decided to let her spend her life chasing a ghost I was long done with. He gestured to the duffel bag in my hands. Give me the bag, Alex. This isn't a murder case anymore. It's a kidnapping charge if you don't drop that evidence and walk away. And right now, Chloe is the only one who's going to prison. I will deliver the intense climax now, focusing on the confrontation, the final, terrifying truth, and ending with a high-stakes, unexpected final twist. The air pressure in the room seemed to drop to zero. Marcus, the guy I trusted with my rent money and my secrets, was standing there telling me he had manufactured 6 years of amnesia. It wasn't a sudden childhood trauma. It was a calculated choice he made in his early 20s to dump the guilt and the consequences onto his sister. Marcus, what are you saying? I stammered, holding the duffel bag defensively against my chest. You knew Chloe was obsessing over a murder, and you just let her? She had to, Marcus said, his gaze hard, completely unfamiliar. Someone had to take the fall for Elias. Elias was the knight I couldn't escape either. He wasn't just watching Chloe. He was a predator who controlled our entire lives. I didn't mean to kill him that night when I was 14. It was self-defense. But Chloe was there, hiding, and she saw the whole thing. She saw me panic and make it look like a suicide. Chloe let out a devastated cry. He loved being the victim, Alex. He loved me being the obsessed, broken sister. It kept the heat off him. Marcus ignored her, focusing entirely on me. I was a kid, but 6 years ago, I realized I couldn't keep carrying her pain and her obsession. It was simpler to forget and let her chase her theories. She became my personal shield, my proof that I was the good sibling, the functional one. She was the night I couldn't escape, but by forgetting, I made her my morning. He took a menacing step toward me. Now, give me the bag, Alex, before I have to explain why you were carrying stolen evidence. I looked from Marcus, the cold, manipulative stranger, to Chloe, the terrified girl who had dedicated her life to clearing her own name, not realizing she was shielding the true perpetrator. Everything clicked. The strange phone calls, the secrecy, the exhaustion. Marcus wasn't stressed about Chloe. He was stressed about managing her. But in that moment, as Marcus lunged forward, Chloe moved. She didn't try to stop him from reaching the bag. Instead, she bolted past me, heading straight for the massive whiteboard. With a powerful, desperate sweep of her arm, she wiped out the entire bottom corner, erasing dozens of names and dates. "It doesn't matter, Marcus," Chloe screamed, her voice cracking. "I figured it out. You forgot the real reason you killed Elias. He wasn't just watching me. He was trying to protect me. He knew Mom was the one who was sick, the one who was hurting me." Marcus froze, mid-lunge, his face completely draining of color. The confidence vanished, replaced by an expression of pure, gut-wrenching terror. "No," he whispered, shaking his head slowly. "No, you don't know that. You can't." Chloe pointed to the now-blank section of the board. "The only reason you forgot was because Elias was about to tell the police that she was the danger, not him. You killed him not to protect me from him, but to protect her from being exposed. And guess what, Marcus? The police reports I put in the bag? I sent a copy to Mom this afternoon. She's finally going to see what you've really become, and she's going to tell them the truth about what happened that night." The final layer of the cover-up was peeled back. Marcus wasn't just a killer. He was a desperate son protecting his mother's secret. But the revelation wasn't the end. As the terrible silence descended, and Marcus stared at the whiteboard, a faint, rhythmic thud-thud-thud started coming from the floor beneath our feet, the ceiling of our downstairs apartment. It was Marcus's work boots, hitting the floor in a familiar, impatient rhythm. Marcus wasn't supposed to be home. The man standing in front of me, the killer, the liar, wasn't my roommate. He was someone else entirely. Who was this person, wearing my best friend's face? And where was the real Marcus? I will now deliver the final section, the resolution, ensuring all major threads are tied together. The final twist is explained, and the story concludes with a warm, memorable, and human-centric takeaway. The floorboards above our heads kept pounding, asterisk thud-thud-thud star. The sound was terrifyingly familiar. It was the sound of Marcus, my real roommate, probably pacing because his night shift was canceled and he was wondering where I'd gone. But that meant the man standing a few feet from me, the man who confessed to murder and 6 years of emotional manipulation, was an imposter. The imposter Marcus looked down at the floorboards, and a flicker of genuine alarm crossed his face. He realized the fatal flaw in his elaborate cover story. He'd never expected the real Marcus to be home. He usually takes the 1 a.m. bus, the imposter stammered, his facade finally crumbling. He didn't look like my killer friend anymore. He looked like a cornered man, younger, and far more frantic than the calculated liar from moments ago. Chloe, seizing the split second of chaos, pointed a shaking finger at the man. "That's not Marcus. That's Michael, Elias's nephew. He looks just like him. Michael used to babysit us." Michael. The name wasn't on the whiteboard, but now that Chloe said it, I could see the slight difference in the nose, the way his ears sat lower than Marcus's. He wasn't Marcus. He was a ghost from the past, trying to settle a different family score. The puzzle pieces snapped together. Elias, the victim, wasn't just a neighbor. He was an uncle figure to Michael. Michael must have witnessed or discovered his uncle's death and become obsessed with revenge. He used the family resemblance to infiltrate my life, befriending me to get close to Chloe, and then, using Marcus's real amnesia as a template, he tried to pin the murder on the real culprit, Marcus. The duffel bag wasn't evidence of Marcus's crime. It was evidence compiled by Michael, disguised to look like Chloe's, intended to be found and used to frame Marcus, relying on the fact that Marcus couldn't remember enough to defend himself. Chloe's accidental text was a desperate plea for help, but Michael, intercepting it, used it to lure me up here and make me the unwitting mule for his frame job. "The police are already on their way, Michael," Chloe said, her voice now steady, the terror replaced by a cool, desperate determination. "I put the real evidence about Mom in the mail, but I put a tracker in the copy I gave you. They're coming for the bag." Michael knew it was over. He looked at the window, then at the door, then back at me, standing there holding his meticulously crafted trap. He sighed, the fight going out of him completely. "He was the knight I couldn't escape," he murmured, quoting Chloe's earlier words, but this time referring to his murdered uncle. "But you, Chloe, you became my morning. You showed me how to be obsessed." He didn't fight when the real police, alerted by Chloe's tracker-filled evidence package, finally burst through the front door. In the aftermath, the story was a mess of grief, misdirection, and tragic family history. Marcus was cleared of all suspicion, but the relief was overshadowed by the shock of what he hadn't forgotten, his mother's darker history, which she finally confessed to the police, bringing an unexpected closure to decades of fear. As for Chloe, she wasn't just the broken sister anymore. She had gone through the fire and emerged as the one who finally cracked the case, not by chasing a ghost, but by finding the living truth. Her relationship with Marcus shifted. There was no more avoidance, just a deep, shared understanding of the burden they both carried, albeit for different reasons. My simple life downstairs was gone forever, but in its place, I gained something far more valuable, a perspective on just how complex and dark the people closest to you can be, and how sometimes the greatest act of love is seeking the truth, no matter how terrifying. I look at Marcus now, and I see the real Marcus, the one who is finally free from a secret he didn't even know he was protecting. And I look at Chloe, and I see a woman who was once lost in the night, but finally found her way back into the sunlight. They are still siblings, still complicated, but they're facing the world together now. And as I sit here, with a new roommate application sitting on my desk for Chloe to move down to our floor, I know one thing for certain. Sometimes, the darkness you run toward is the only path that leads you to the light. It took a secret text, a fake killer, and a mountain of lies, but we all finally got our morning. But I still haven't figured out why Michael thought he looked enough like Marcus to pull this off. Was the resemblance really that strong, or was I just that oblivious to the person I was living with?